Hello, everybody. It's me again from the Gauntlet, Ricks. Tonight, I want to get into something that I touched on in my last video when I was talking about the Frankfurt School and how communism and socialism really gained a strong foothold in this country with, of course, the counterculture of the 60s. One of the things I talked about was a matter of congressional record, per the communist subversion, socialist subversion in this country. One of the things I talked about was a something that was read aloud on the House of Representatives, on the floor of the House. And this is a matter of congressional record. So your media, Hollywood, leftists, liberals in general, left-wingers, can't deny that this exists. Right? That's a matter of congressional frickin' record. So when they sit there and say, that's just crazy, or that don't matter, they marginalize it, tell them to go to hell. Seriously. This to me, when I tell you these 45 goals, you're going to see exactly that what I was talking about, what a lot of people told you about, what Joe McCarthy warned us of back during the Red Scare. He was right. People talk about a witch hunt. There's nothing wrong with a witch hunt when there's a witch. Now, some of the tactics that Joe McCarthy used might have been a little bit extreme, but facing what we were facing back then, I can understand. Because look at, when I tell you these 45 goals, you're going to say, damn, they've achieved a lot of them. And these arrogant college millennials and people went to college, they won't do a mea culpa. They won't acknowledge that, man, we've been had, for 3 decades we've been lied to, we've been indoctrinated by the colleges, by these professors who basically were the posterity of the Frankfurt movement. You can't deny it when it's a matter of congressional record. This happened on January 10th, 1963, and a person named Herlong was the name, from Florida. They read this aloud on the House of Representatives. Thursday, January 10th, 1963. These are what they call the 45 goals of communism for America. I'm reading this off of a list off my computer. Now, some of these sound noble. I'm not going to lie to you. Some of them sound really good. Like you think, yeah, who wouldn't want this? But you got to remember, when someone's trying to change you from the outside, you got to wonder why they're trying to change you, what they're trying to do, we all know back there during the Cold War. I remember I grew up during the Cold War in the 80s. A great time to be alive, but still, a lot of us remember the scare and stuff, what was going on. But, number one, the U.S. acceptance of coexistence as the only alternative to atomic war. Now, that sounds good, all right? I'm not going to lie, that sounds noble, once again. But having said that, you can't just automatically accept coexistence with evil people. You can't. You ever heard of the saying, one rotten apple spoils the bunch? It's a similar concept. You can't coexist with people that are evil, that wish to do the world evil, that wish to do maybe your allies evil. So coexistence is great, but you have to have guards. You can't just accept coexistence and let someone get away with whatever they want to. So that's one thing. Number two is the U.S. willingness to capitulate in preference to engaging in atomic war. And I hear what I said. Once again, atomic war, I don't want it. The only people I could think that would want it would be the uber elite globalist deep state people that are billionaires, because they would probably survive a nuclear war. People can survive nuclear war. Would it be easy? No. But the people that would have the most to lose would be people like you and me. The average everyday American. We'd have the most to lose, and they wouldn't care. The deep state elites, the uber elites, the globalists, they wouldn't give a damn. But I would never capitulate if I had to. When you have nuclear weapons, the thing is you'll want to have them so you don't have to use them, but you still want to have them because you have a place at the table. If you had one country or a block of countries that were all allies, or maybe even a rogue state, maybe even a rogue group of people, which is even scary, Islamic jihadists and stuff. We all have heard that they're trying to gain uranium and plutonium, which we know that's one of the biggest component of making a nuclear bomb. But if you have a nuclear arsenal, you have a seat at the table. Because if you didn't, and you had one country, they would be able to run roughshod over the whole damn world. There ain't a damn thing you could do about it. Because if they said they wanted to take this from your country, they wanted to do this, what are you going to do? Tell them, we'll fight. And they'd say, well, yeah, we can fight for a while, but when it all comes down to it, we'll drop a couple of mushrooms on you, and you'll be done. And guess what? Any sane person would say, I'm not doing that. So if you have nuclear weapons, you have a place at the table. The third one is once again to do with nuclear. Number 3, develop the illusion that total disarmament by the United States would be a demonstration of moral strength. Once again, we all know nuclear weapons, when it all comes down to it, they scare most people. But you don't ever want to disarm yourself not knowing what the rest of the... It's just like if you're playing a poker game. You don't want to sit there and fold your cards or put your cards on the table till you have an idea what everyone else is playing. Now, you don't know exactly what they're playing, but that's the whole point. You don't know what they have. They don't know what you have. You don't sit there and say, hey, I have 3 jacks and an ace and a queen. You don't want to tell people that. Same thing with nuclear. You don't want to tell people what you have, how much the technology you have. You don't want to do that. So it's very similar to that. You want to keep your cards, your options on the table. So, and we've seen that. Once again, these are goals for America by the communists. Now, tell me how many of you out there remember all through the last 25, 30, 40 years how long people have been talking about disarmament. If you can guarantee everyone, I'm talking every last country, every last individual who might even have access to it would disarm, and you could guarantee it, which you can't, it's all rhetorical, then I would be willing to. And I think most countries would be willing to, but there's no way in hell I'd ever disarm if I was the president, not knowing full well that everyone else disarmed. It's a pipe dream, sadly. Number 4, permit free trade between all nations regardless of communist affiliation, regardless of whether or not items could be used for war. Now, how would that help the United States out? Free trade. How many times we hear people talk about free trade? We even hear supposed Republicans talk about free trade. Matter of fact, Republicans are big for free trade. But more than anything, globalists want free trade. Free trade don't help us out. It doesn't help an industrialized, civilized, powerful country like the United States. Free trade helps out the smaller countries. Now, that's nice if you want to help the smaller countries, but we can't be giving away the shop when we're helping them out. We got to make sure we take care of America first. That's our responsibility. Got to get some refreshment. So, once again, there's another thing. Number 4, free trade. That's another thing, NAFTA. See what I'm saying? Some of this stuff they've already been able to accomplish. Extension, number 5, is extension of long-term loans to Russia and Soviet satellites. We have loaned. We have definitely loaned to the Eastern Bloc countries. Now, I know a lot of people are thinking out there, and they're thinking, well, communism's fallen. The USSR has fallen. Not all of it has. There's still communism out there. There's still socialism out there. Matter of fact, it's kind of starting to peek its ugly head up again. If you look at Russia and Vladimir Putin, he just annexed Crimea. He's messing around in the Ukraine. We have strong socialist movements and communist movements in just about every country. Just about every country we have them. But a lot of it's actually being replaced by globalism, which to me is just as dangerous as communism and socialism. Number 6, provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. That's a little bit different than number 4, but it's still along them lines. How often does our country provide aid regardless of who they are? When we provide aid to someone, unless it's a humanitarian mission, like a powerful communist country has an earthquake, I can understand helping them out, but giving aid to them is different than a humanitarian mission. Giving aid to someone is basically just giving them, loans, and letting them be able to build up. And who knows what they're going to use this money for when we give them aid? When the USA, through your tax dollars, my tax dollars, give them aid, you don't know what the hell they're going to use them for. I don't either. So it's stupid. And all the nuclear, these people from the UN who are corrupt as hell, do you trust them to go in there and say, yeah, they're not using it for nuclear? I don't trust them. I don't. I would rather be called paranoid than a naive idiot that trusts anyone. Number 7, grant recognition of Red China, admission of Red China to the UN. Enough said. Richard Nixon done a lot to help out with that, which I would have wanted them to come to the table. I'd have come to the table with them, but there would have been having some capitulation on their side, because their human rights abuses are terrible. Number 8, set up East and West Germany as separate states in spite of Khrushchev's promise in 1955 to settle the German question by free elections under supervision of the UN. Once again, the UN, whenever they're involved in anything, you can guarantee something's not going to be quite right, quite kosher, as some people might say. We all know after World War II, Germany was split up. The communists, Russia, took east, and the West Germany was obviously the United States, Great Britain, France. They all controlled a sector of Germany, and they should have had elections. But look how long it took for East Germany to fall, and Russia, 1989. I remember it very well because I had just gotten out of the Marine Corps. And I remember the night the Berlin Wall fell, how crazy that was. But look at, once again, they were able to set up the East and West Germany. And we didn't do much about it. We allowed it. Number 9, prolong the conferences to ban atomic tests because the United States has agreed to suspend tests as long as negotiations are in progress. We have had a stop in nuclear testing for a long time, and as much as that sounds admirable, you can't let what's this old saying about Rolling Stone gathers no moss? Unfortunately, weapons of war, like everything, like just about everything out there, they have to test it. You have to make sure these things they're working properly. You have to make sure that the implementation is proper, and God forbid we ever have to use these things. You have to make sure that they're still in working order. We shouldn't be agreeing to stopping all tests unless making sure everyone else is. Now, that goes to one thing that I want to talk about real quick with Donald Trump in North Korea. Look what he was able to get done with North Korea. They stopped testing. Now, I've heard recently that they may have started testing again. I hope not. But only our country knows, the people high up knows. Once again, I don't want to get into that, though. 10. Allow all Soviet satellites individual representation in the UN. Now, I don't know if that ever came to fruition, but there are certain countries that we should have never allowed in the UN because they can affect things. And, but like I said, some of this I don't want to get into big time, but some of it I'd like to. Number 11, promote the UN as the only hope for mankind if its charter is rewritten. Demand that it be set up as a one-world government with its own independent armed forces. And then in parentheses, some communist leaders believe the world can be taken over as easily by the UN as by Moscow. Sometimes these two centers compete with each other as they are now doing in the Congo. And that was back, obviously in 1963. Once again, the UN. You see what I'm saying here? The UN. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. How many times does our country, people in our country, people all around the world basically fall flat on their face for the UN and say, well, let's find out what the UN says. Let's see if we can get a declaration of war. Let's see if we can get sanctions. See if UN will approve this, if the UN will approve that. The United States, I'm telling you right now, we should boot the United Nations off our damn soil. Screw the United Nations. They basically wouldn't exist without us. It's nothing but an unelected group of bureaucrats trying to rule the world. We are a sovereign damn country. All right, and the United Nations, we don't need them because they're basically always anti-American. They always criticize, and they're also anti-Israel. I'm a strong supporter of Israel. I'm not Jewish, but I'm still a strong supporter of Israel, and I support the Jewish people in Israel. So once again, the UN. If you ever watch news and you're into politics, you'll understand how many leaders around the world speak of the UN. Number 12, resist any attempt to outlaw the Communist Party. We still do have communists. They're just not very strong. So this is looked at as good. We always talk about a free country. But there are certain things, I submit to you, certain things that are so invasive and so subversive. Excuse me. Pop. But certain things that are so subversive and invasive, I do believe that they should be at least monitored very closely. I don't care how unpopular this is to say, certain things are not good. I don't believe in moral equivalency. I don't believe in relativism, everything's relative. No, certain things are better than other things. Certain things, I don't believe in a people being superior, but I believe in ideas that are better and being superior. So, once again, another thing. Number 13, do away with all loyalty oaths. Now, I don't know about exactly what they mean by loyalty oaths, but I can say this. How often do we see people vilified, they call them flag wavers, people that are proud of their country, that are fervent patriots, loyalty to a country. It's kind of in that vein. I don't think that's a good idea to vilify or to deride loyalty, especially to a country, to a family, to a country, to your God, our God, God of Israel, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, God of the Bible. Number 14, continue giving Russia access to the U.S. Patent Office. Once again, I don't know a lot about that. I don't want to comment on that. Number 15, capture one or both of the political parties in the United States. Can you say donkey? I absolutely believe, beyond the shadow of a doubt, I'm telling you right now, the Democrat Party is not the Democrat Party anymore. As I told you in the last video, 1968, I believe, was a turning point between the Democrat Party of the old guard and the Democrat Party of the new guard. Democrat Party of the old guard basically lost in 68. They basically turned tail and basically slowly started turning their party over to socialists and communists. And look at the Democrat Party of today. We have people in their party. Bernie Sanders says he's a Democrat, socialist, independent. I don't care what he puts before his name. He's still a socialist. Democrat, socialist. If he's just a Democrat, call yourself a Democrat. He's putting socialists in there for a damn reason. Any idiot, all these stupid college kids, I'm sorry, their hubris is sickening. But they think they're so damn intelligent. If you want to listen to a little bit about Bernie Sanders, listen to Michael Savage. He'll tell you about Bernie Sanders. Tell anyone with a half brain in their head, they'll tell you about Bernie Sanders and his ideas of socialism. Socialism will not work. I'm telling you right now, communism will not work. And that's, let's see, sometimes I lose my train of thought. Number 15, or we already said that, capture one or both political parties in the United States. As I said, all you have to do is look at the Democrat Party. This Ocasio-Cortez, this congresswoman, she's openly socialist, but she's part of the Democrat Party. Look at some of these. The Democrat Party now has Muslims in their party. So when you take over one party, you absolutely have a seat at the table in our country. Okay, number 16, use technical decisions of the courts to weaken basic American institutions by claiming their activities violate civil rights. I don't think this is another one that's a slam dunk. How many times have we seen the courts absolutely weaken American institutions? Boy Scouts of America, the Boy Scouts of America were able to, for so long, to be able to have their own charter and to be able to do what they want, but through political pressure and inadvertently through the courts. Eventually the Boy Scouts capitulated. But the courts are so damn powerful and corrupt in this country, it's just astonishing and staggering. And it really bothers me how many times, and it says down here, by claiming their activities violate civil rights. Civil rights are good. No one's saying they're not good. but they're being used to bludgeon everyone over the head with this status quo of today, with this groupthink that everything you have to agree with this, you have to agree with that, you can't say anything about this, you can't say anything about that, and on and on. Number 17, get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Once again, schools. Not just colleges and universities. Now they're into the high schools. I mean, some of these goals that they have for our country, you'd have to be seriously blind not to see that they have not been able to accomplish a lot of these goals. They absolutely have been able to accomplish a lot of these goals. Because people on our side, the decent people, the Christians, the conservatives, the Orthodox Jews, the traditionalists, the patriots, the right-wingers, people that love this country, that stood up for it, the people that, fought at Valley Forge, the people that went to Iwo Jima, you could go on and on. Our baby boom generation, the World War II generation, they were so tired from fighting a war abroad in the Pacific and Europe, they came back home and they just basically wanted the best for their children, and I understand that, but they didn't realize that a cultural war was on the horizon. They didn't realize that they were turning their children over to far-left Marxists in these colleges. So now we have what we see. But once again, the schools, another thing that they've achieved. They've absolutely been able to control the schools. The teachers' unions. If you've ever seen some of these teachers' unions, I remember years ago when one of the president of the teachers' union, or he was the chairman of the teachers' union, the head person, basically saying that we control these kids. We'll tell them what we want to tell them. And it's scary, because a lot of people still think that we're under the illusion that we have a lot of control, and you can have control if you exercise it. You have, if you are a parent right now listening to this, you have the most influence over your kid. And if you foster a great relationship with your child, if you love them, truly love them, and bring them up, I personally would bring them up as Christian. But if you bring them up with a full, solid moral footing, whether it's Christianity or Orthodox Judaism, or some other, traditional type thing, that's a very good guard against globalism, communism, and socialism. 18, gain control of all student newspapers. Once again, if you've ever been to college campus, these college newspapers are usually just ripe with tons of examples of communism and socialism. These students, the students are very communist and socialist. How many examples do you need that where a lot of these movements started are colleges, and where do they get their word out? Through these student unions, through the newspapers the students control. This is where they get their word out. Antifa, that's where a lot of this started. SDS, Students of a Democratic Society. The free speech movement, or free speech, back then it might have been free speech, not anymore. The Weather Underground, all this stuff started in colleges, universities. Number 19, use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under communist attack. I'm not going to get into that right now, but we all know about student riots and stuff. Anything that challenges the communist socialist line, they're going to attack. Number 20, infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy-making positions. The press, New York Times, Washington Post, on and on. These people have long been very sympathetic and had communist socialist leanings. Once again, look where they came from. Look where the media comes from. The universities and the colleges. That's where they come from. Okay, number 21, gain control of key positions in radio, TV, and motion pictures. Hollywood. I don't think anyone, this is exactly, if we listened to Joe McCarthy, he was trying to tell us. But the minute you talk about McCarthy, even today, for those who are politically involved and who know a history of the United States, the minute you start even defending Joe McCarthy, they act like you're defending Hitler, which is absurd. Joe McCarthy was right. I will tell you right now, he was right. Pat Buchanan was right in 1992. All you have to do is look around you and you'll see it. Okay, But, I mean, radio, TV, and motion pictures, I mean, hell, there was, I mean, you look at some of the people that, Ed Asner, he I've heard he had communist socialist leanings, or, affiliations with the Communist Party. A lot of these people did. I don't know for sure. I'm not going to sit there and absolutely say they did, but I heard. And I don't, as I said, if you look at what the stuff they peddle in Hollywood, it ain't no surprise. 22. Continue discrediting American culture by degrading all forms of artistic expression. An American communist cell was told to eliminate all good sculpture from parks and buildings, substitute shapeless, awkward, and meaningless forms. How many times you went to a museum and seen the most bizarre-looking, stupid, abstract garbage? Some of it is just stupid. Now, I don't know how much this absolutely affects our civilization, our country, but nonetheless, it's something else that I think that they were successful in implementing. 23. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. That's number 23. Ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. You want to talk about subversive art and offensive art? I'm sure if any of you have watched media and heard of stories, you've heard of something called the Piss Christ. This is the most sickening display I've ever thought. This is not art either. I will tell you what the Piss Christ is. It's a crucifix, I believe, a picture of Jesus Christ on the cross, our Savior. Well, my Savior, maybe not yours, but a picture of Jesus Christ on the cross, crucifix, dipped in urine, submerged completely in urine. That's what it's called, the Piss Christ. How is that art? I mean, that's absurd. That'd be like me throwing up on a piece of paper and putting a turd in the middle of it and calling it art. That's how ridiculous arts have gotten. They consider anything art now. There's, once again, breaking down order. No standards, no decency. Let's see. 24. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech, free press. Duh. That's so obvious. I remember back in the 80s when there was a Parents Research Council. There was a hearing in Congress, and I think it was in the House. Tipper Gore was one of the ones that really headed it, and they were trying to censor some of this music. And as much as I love rock and roll, I love it, and I like some of this people, their music. I do believe some of their stuff should have been censored. It absolutely should have been, because it was. Some of the stuff that they said in the songs is very suggestive and can be very damaging, especially to kids. Their minds are still in the processing stage. And when you're that age, you're very impressionable, and these bastards know it. They know kids are impressionable. But I remember Dee Snider and John Denver and Frank Zappa all were part of this. They were part of the people that were speaking out against censorship. We all know what ended up happening. They put a warning parental advisory on these labels that had provocative and vulgar language and sexual suggestions. They ended up, getting a little bit of a victory, because it also gave them great publicity. Number 25, break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Once again, look at TV, look at the magazines. They call all this stuff expression and art. And, the thing is, a lot of people don't realize, a lot of what you may not realize, you realize our country still has obscenity laws in the books. Obscenity, people say, well, you have to have freedom of speech, freedom of the press. That's true. But we still have obscenity laws. There's always exceptions to every right we have in the Bill of Rights. You all know about the freedom of speech. You can't go in a theater and yell fire. We all know you can't do that. It's the same thing with pornography. You can't sit there and you can have freedom of speech and freedom of the press, but you can't just print anything you want. But we're ignoring these obscenity laws. We basically just act like they don't even exist. And this does degrade, this does rot a person's mind. When you have when you're over, I think we overly sexualize our culture, and we basically break down sex into something that's just totally hedonistic pleasure instead of what it's supposed to be. Now, I don't want to get into details here, but everyone knows sex can be pleasurable. But I think we've almost gotten down to the level of animals. We basically sex is just basically a form of recreation now. I mean, a lot of people, you've heard of one-night stands, booty calls, and all that. That's what our culture is becoming, because we're totally backing off. We're totally getting into the world and what the world wants. We're not having a guard on our minds anymore, thinking, wait a minute, is this right? I have a right to do it, but should I do it? There's a big difference between if you can do something and whether you should. Okay, number 26. Now this is a big one, and I'm sure all you will agree with this one. They've absolutely achieved this, sadly. Number 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. I can do a whole video, a whole telecast about this movement, this very invasive and subversive and frankly repugnant movement and agenda, because they do have an agenda. We'll get into that a little bit later. But I don't think anyone can deny that homosexuality now is looked at as just average, just looked at as another lifestyle. Or look, they actually try and say it's innate. It's not innate. This is not innate. And as I said, I'll get into this maybe in a whole video later. But degeneracy, homosexuality, and promiscuity, they absolutely a lot of it looked at as normal, natural, and healthy. They achieved it. Boom. Another mark off their list. 27. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Infiltrate the churches. There are a lot of people that have infiltrated the churches. I would submit to you that the Catholic Church, while I'm not Catholic, I still respect the Catholic Church and their morals. And they're, a lot of them are very vocal about certain things. I'm not a Catholic. I'm a Baptist. But they have did a good job of subverting the church and infiltrating it. These priests, I will bet any amount of money, these priests that are molesting these poor children, a lot of these people are total fakes. They're apostates. And just one example of this is, anyone ever heard of Jonestown? Drinking the Kool-Aid? Well, it goes back to a man named Jim Jones, who was a pastor, supposedly a Christian pastor. This guy did not believe in God. That's right, he did not believe in God. He basically looked at himself. He was a social revolutionary. Watch anything about Jonestown, you'll learn about Jim Jones. He used the church for his own, I guess almost his own deification. He almost tried to make it himself. People actually started calling him father and stuff. But he used the church. He subverted the church. He infiltrated. He's part of it. He was a microcosm of a larger picture. So